Welcome back to the deep dive. We are continuing our journey through the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, the MPEP. It's the big rule book for the U.S. patent system. Pretty dense stuff, but we're here to break it down section by section, make it, well, a bit easier to digest. Today we're focusing on Chapter 1800. That's all about the Patent Cooperation Treaty, the PCT. It's an international system, lets you file one application to seek protection in, a whole bunch of countries at once. Pretty neat. And specifically, we're hitting MPP Section 1805 today. Our mission, basically, is to get clear on the rules for where you actually file these international applications, especially when the USPTO, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office is involved. And just so you know, everything we talk about is coming straight from MPP Section 1805. That's our source.
That's right. And Section 1805 really kicks off with the most fundamental rule about the USPTO's role here. The USPTO can only act as what's called a receiving office. That's where you first submit the application, only if at least one applicant is a U.S. national or a U.S. resident.
Okay, so that's the baseline. U.S. connection needed.
Exactly. And it's not just a procedural thing. It's baked into the law. It's in the U.S. Code 35 U.S.C. 361, and it lines up with the PCT rules themselves, 18.1 and 19.1. So yeah, that U.S. link citizenship or residency, that's the absolute key to using the USPTO as your entry point, as the receiving office.
Okay, let's unpack this a little. So it's crystal clear then, if I, as the applicant, don't have U.S. nationality or residency, the USPTO just says, nope, not here. What happens then? Say I'm, I don't know, a German inventor, no U.S. ties. Is that just a dead end with the USPTO?
Pretty much. For being the receiving office, the MPP states clearly, if none of the applicants meet that requirement, you cannot file with the USPTO as the RO. But, and this is important, it's not necessarily a total dead end for that application packet itself. The rules say that in that situation, the application may be forwarded by the USPTO. It gets sent over to the International Bureau.
The International Bureau. That's WIPO in Geneva, right?
Exactly. The World Intellectual Property Organization, they run the administrative side of the PCT. So even if you maybe sent it to the USPTO by mistake, there's this mechanism, this potential safety net to forward it to WIPO. And WIPO can act as a receiving office no matter where the applicant is from.
Okay, that's a really critical point. So it avoids, immediate failure. Gives you a chance. All right, shifting gears a bit. Let's say I do meet the requirements. I'm a U.S. resident. I can use the USPTO as my receiving office. How do I actually get the papers to them?
Right.
What methods does 1805 talk about?
Right. So MPP 1805 lays out the accepted ways. Electronic filing, using the USPTO's own system, that's definitely encouraged. It's fast, you get confirmation, all that.
That makes sense. Digital age and all.
But paper is still absolutely fine. You can still do it the old-fashioned way. If you go with paper, though, you really need to use the right address. It's mail stop PCT. That ensures it gets routed correctly inside the USPTO to the folks who handle these PCT applications.
Mail stop PCT. Got it. Any other ways besides e-filing and regular mail?
Yep. Hand delivery is an option. You can physically take it there. And also using the U.S. Postal Service's Priority Mail Express service. That's specifically mentioned as valid, too. So you've got a few choices.
Okay, now here's something I know tricks people up, especially those used to regular U.S. filings. That certificate of mailing thing, where you mail it first class, sign a form saying when you mailed it, and that date counts. Does that work for PCT applications sent to the USPTO?
Yeah. That's a really important distinction. MPE 1805 is explicit. The certificate of mailing procedure under 37 CFR 1.8, it does not apply to PCT applications.
Whoa, okay. So that standard U.S. practice is just out the window for PCTs.
Completely out. You can't rely on it.
So what does count then? If the mailing date doesn't matter, is it just when they actually get it?
Exactly right. Because you can't use the certificate of mailing, the key date, the one that establishes your filing date with the USPTO as the receiving office, is the actual date of receipt, not when you mailed it. The day it physically arrives and gets logged in by the USPTO.
Man, that makes tracking super important then for paper filings. You absolutely need proof it arrived on time.
Definitely. Though there is one small buffer. If that date of receipt happens to land on a Saturday, Sunday, or a federal holiday when the USPTO is closed,
Okay.
then your filing date automatically rolls over to the next business day.
Ah, okay. That weekend and holiday rule provides a little bit of breathing room. Still, the main point is get it received, don't rely on the postmark. Let's talk about other ways of sending things. What about fax? Can you fax stuff for a PCT application?
MPP 1805 does talk about faxing, yes, but it's pretty limited, especially for the main application documents. It specifically says you cannot fax the international application itself.
Right.
Or any color drawings. Or, interestingly, any papers needed later for national stage entry.
So the core filing documents are a no-go for fax.
Right. They need a more, let's say, robust delivery method. But there's a curious exception mentioned. While you can't fax the application, you can fax the demand for international preliminary examination.
Huh. Okay, what's that?
That's something you file later in the process, maybe up to 30 months after your priority date. It's basically asking for an optional extra examination report before you go into the national stage in different countries. So that specific later document. Fax is okay, but the initial application, no. It really shows you need to be careful about what you're sending and how.
That distinction is super important. Initial filing versus later demands. Okay, so we've covered filing with the USPTO if you're eligible, how to do it, this fax wrinkle. What about those cases where maybe the USPTO isn't the right place for the whole process? Like maybe the language isn't right or something changes with the applicants?
Yeah, that goes back to this idea of competence. The USPTO might be okay as the initial receiving office, but maybe not competent to handle everything that follows. Perhaps the application is in a language they don't accept for that stage, or maybe the applicant's status changes, making them ineligible later on. In those kinds of situations, MPP 1805 explains that the application may be forwarded by the USPTO to the International Bureau. It follows PCT Rule 19.4.
Okay, so that forwarding mechanism again sounds like a safety valve. Is the main point there to, like, save the filing date?
Absolutely. That's a huge benefit highlighted right in the source material. Forwarding it to the International Bureau avoids losing that critical filing date you got when it was first received. And it keeps the process moving. It ensures continuity, letting the application proceed with a receiving office that is competent, even if the first choice wasn't quite right for the long haul.
That makes sense. Now, the MPP also mentions someone might choose to file directly with the International Bureau, right, even if they could have used the USPTO.
Yes, that's covered too. An applicant might proactively decide to bypass the USPTO and go straight to WIPO.
Why would you do that? If the USPTO is an option, why go direct to Geneva?
Well, the MPP gives a pretty specific example related to claiming priority. You usually have 12 months from your first filing date, the priority date, to file your PCT application.
Right, the priority year.
But the PCT has this sort of grace period, an extra 2 months where you can ask to restore that priority right if you miss the 12-month deadline. To get that restoration, you typically need to show you missed the deadline in spite of due care, or maybe that it was unintentional, depending on the office. And the MPP notes that the in spite of due care standard, well, it might find better support if you file that request directly with the International Bureau.
That's interesting. Why would WIPO potentially be better for a due care argument than the USPTO? Is their standard different?
This section doesn't go super deep into the why, but generally different offices acting as receiving offices can sometimes interpret standards like due care slightly differently. An applicant might feel the International Bureau's interpretation, being the central PCT body, is perhaps more established or potentially more favorable to their specific facts for missing the deadline. So they file there directly to put that specific argument before that specific office first.
I see. It's a strategic choice based on perceived interpretations.
It can be, but there's a catch if you try this after filing with the USPTO. If you file with the USPTO first and then ask them to forward it to the IB, maybe for this reason, the USPTO might say no. They can decline to forward it if substantial processing has already happened at the USPTO before you ask.
Okay, that makes sense. You can't just have them do a bunch of work and then say, oh, never mind, send it somewhere else. Substantial processing probably means they've already sunk time and effort into it.
Exactly. The forwarding is more for when the USPTO isn't the right place from the start or quickly becomes unable to handle it, not really as a late-game strategic switcheroo.
Gotcha.
Now, stepping back slightly, there's one more really critical piece mentioned in 1805, especially for U.S. inventors filing internationally, the foreign filing license.
Yes, the FFL. Always important. How does that play into PCT filings?
Well, if your international application is filed directly with the International Bureau, or if it gets forwarded there by the USPTO, you might need a foreign filing license from the USPTO. Remember, the whole point of the U.S. foreign filing license system is national security. It's to let the government check inventions made in the U.S. before they get disclosed overseas.
Right. Make sure no state secrets are accidentally shipped out in a patent application.
Pretty much. But MPP 1805 also lists the conditions where you don't need one for your PCT filing. It's waived under specific circumstances. First, if the invention simply wasn't made in the United States, if all the inventive work happened abroad, then U.S. national security isn't implicated in the same way. No license needed in that case.
Okay, makes sense. What's the other waiver?
The other big one is if you already filed a corresponding U.S. national application for the same invention,
Okay.
and you filed that U.S. application at least 6 months before filing the international one, and importantly, that U.S. application is not currently under a secrecy order.
So file in the U.S., wait 6 months, make sure it's not secret, then file the PCT, and you're generally good to go without needing a separate license for the PCT filing itself.
That's the gist of it. The 6-month window gives the government its chance to review. If they don't slap a secrecy order on it in that time, the system basically presumes it's okay to proceed with foreign filings like the PCT.
It feels like a clear process. File U.S. first, wait, then go international. Good to know.
All right.
Before we wrap this section up, we definitely want to give a quick shout out, a special thank you to Mike Shepard. Mike's the creative director who put this whole MPP audio series together. Seriously, Mike, your work is what makes these deep dives happen for everyone listening, so thank you.
Agreed. And now, as we always do, the official disclaimer that comes with our source material. Disclaimer. This summary of the MPEP was generated using AI tools, including ChatGPT and NotebookLM, and may contain errors or omissions. It is provided for general educational and informational purposes only, and is not legal advice or a substitute for formal instruction. For authoritative guidance, consult the official MPEP, a qualified instructor, or a registered patent practitioner.
Okay, so there you have it. That was MPP Section 1805. It's all about the where and how of filing your international PCT application when the U.S. PTO might be involved. We saw how crucial that U.S. connection nationality or residency is for using the U.S. PTO as the receiving office. We covered the ways to file electronic, paper hand delivery, and that really critical point about the certificate of mailing not applying. Remember, it's the receipt date that counts.
Right. And the limits on faxing, the forwarding mechanism to the International Bureau as a safety net, and even that strategic thought about maybe filing directly with WIPO sometimes.
Plus, the ever-important foreign filing license considerations. Getting these initial steps right, it's absolutely foundational for your PCT journey. These aren't just, bureaucratic hoops. They directly impact your filing date, priority claims, and legal compliance.
Definitely not just ticking boxes.
Right.
Real consequences.
So here's something to chew on as we finish up. What does all this procedural detail really mean for global innovation? These specific rules and documents like the MPP about where and how you file. How do they actually shape the way inventors protect ideas across borders? Do they smooth the path, creating a predictable system? Or do they sometimes add layers of complexity that inventors, especially smaller ones, might find daunting? Just something to think about regarding the machinery of the international patent system. Thanks for tuning in for this deep dive into MPP Section 1805. We hope you'll stick with us as we keep unpacking the MPP section by section. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.